Welcome to Straight Talk with Jon Brunson. So this is our second podcast, and we told people we were going to do this. One of the things we stressed was that we wanted an array of topics. We didn't want to be just hunting, fishing. It could be pretty much anything: family, business, world travel, whatever. And we've definitely are. With some of these questions that we're getting, everyone has listened because we're definitely getting some questions from, we're definitely getting some very diverse questions. So on today's podcast, the topic is going to be cryptocurrency, if you can believe that. So I've had a few questions sent my way about crypto, and it is something that I do invest in. So I'm going to at least give my 2 cents worth today. I am by far no expert. I've got about 5 years into researching cryptos and, messing around and investing and, learning some things, mostly the hard way. But so I definitely have, I guess, some thoughts on it and can share, my experiences and what I think, especially to someone who is completely brand new to it or has no idea. Our first question comes to us from Sam Jacobs in California. His question is, John, do you invest in crypto? If not, why? And if so, can you give us some advice? Okay. So like I mentioned, I am far from a crypto expert. I am going to give you my thoughts, what I've experienced, what I think is going to happen based on, about 5 years of, research and kind of dabbling in the crypto market. And also talking to, a lot of guys that are smarter than me that I have access to because of the whole TV part of my life. So to answer that question, yes, I do invest in crypto. Now, after 5 years of researching, really trying to figure it out, subscribing to a lot of different letters and looking at, all kinds of, trading algorithms and AI and all these, 50 million guys that send you newsletters every month that they've got it all figured out. I've pretty much, ran the gauntlet of trying to figure out what's the best approach with crypto. And I can at least share what I've learned so far. Number one, my take on crypto, right now is it's probably the future and it's definitely worth getting involved in. Back when crypto first came out, whenever that was and Bitcoin hit and everything else, I'm sure, most of the world was like me, completely clueless. I remember way back then people talking about crypto and Bitcoin. I was like, oh man, that's just like bizarre, just like, I don't, it's like, I didn't even want to take the time to try to understand it. It's just one of those things. The government was saying it was not safe and people were saying it was scams and, all this stuff's unregulated and blah, blah, blah. And so, when that first big wave came that, of course, years later we realized made a lot of people rich. I was like, I'm sure most people on the planet just kind of stayed away from it. Once that big wave hit, once everything really happened and, a lot of people made a lot of money. I had some friends that actually did get involved and did do well. Now, these weren't friends that I see all the time. These were acquaintances, friends of friends. And once it reached a point where it's like, man, people have made a lot of money at this, I kind of started paying attention to it and reading up on it and this, that, and the other. And then about 5 years ago, I met a guy who was a new boyfriend to one of my one of my best friends, one of me and Gina's best girlfriends, she had a new boyfriend that was really big into crypto. So, started kind of picking his brain and looking at the success that he had. And it really, I guess that kind of really piqued my interest and, kind of put me on this road again 5 years ago to start really researching this stuff and try to figure out, hey, I think there's some big opportunities here, maybe some opportunities that we've never seen or will never see in our lifetime again. So my initial approach to crypto was, and really this hasn't changed much for me, but my belief in it gets stronger and stronger every day. I do believe that there's another big wave coming. I think it's going to be bigger than the first one. You can see things getting legitimate. Things are becoming more legitimate. The government's getting involved. Things are getting regulated. You're seeing a lot of enormous. Of course, if you're digging and paying attention, you're not seeing this, on mainstream news, or if you're not paying attention. But if you're paying attention, there's some enormous, companies, the American Expresses of the world, Bank of America, Wells Fargo's, that are signing up with a lot of these crypto companies like, Ripple and XRP to handle their transactions and, blah, blah, blah. My point is there's definitely with, the talk of the government going to a digital coin, going to a digital currency. And then you look at what crypto's doing and how strong it's coming on. And you look at, Ripple and XRP winning the lawsuit with the government. You can just see that you can, if you've been paying attention and if you've, been researching and really watching what's going on over the last few years, which again, most people haven't, especially if you're asking me. So, over these last few years, you can see that it's here to stay, and our world's going to a digital world, and that's going to be everything, including currency. So, when I first started tackling crypto, my strategy, which really hasn't. My strategy hasn't changed a lot. Okay. What I think's going to happen, and, my belief getting stronger in crypto, that continues. But my basic strategy that I started with a few years ago hasn't really changed. And that is put in, an amount of money that you can afford to lose. I don't have a crystal ball. I can tell you that my confidence is extremely high at this point, after 5 years, especially after the last couple of years of really paying attention to what's going on, talking to a lot of, again, big money guys that I know that are a whole lot smarter than me. There's definitely an opportunity there. Do I think crypto's here to stay? Yes. Do I think, it's going to disappear? No. And do I think there are some enormous opportunities in crypto? Yes. It's obviously figuring out what those are. So my approach was, research, pay attention to the news, subscribe to a lot of different crypto newsletters, it's really just, time consuming, learning, sifting through it, trying to pay attention to what people are saying, but not get caught up in the hype, which, been there, done that. And even though, again, my belief is getting stronger, my mentality right now is still, put in what you can afford to lose. I feel safer and safer about it every day. But, am I going to go, empty mainstream investment accounts and dump everything into crypto? No. Not because I don't believe in it, but I don't know enough about it, and I'm not that good at it to take that kind of risk. So, my first piece of advice would be, if it's something that you want to get involved in, then get involved small, and put in a dollar figure that worst case scenario, you lose it, and it's not the end of the world. So overall, I believe, based on my research and the guys that I talk to, that, we're going into a bull cycle. We're going into, that growth cycle. I can see it like in my portfolio already. I can see it starting to creep. Most of the smart guys out there are saying this is going to run through 24 and probably 25. So we're looking at a 1 to 2 year run where, based on everything that I'm seeing, it's not about maybe just picking that lucky winner. It's the entire crypto market's going to move, and it's going to move aggressively and drastically. I think it's a big opportunity. I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot that's going to happen with crypto over the next 2 years. And I will say this, I truly believe that if you sit on the sidelines right now and do absolutely nothing, I believe you will regret that, in my opinion, over the course of the next year or two. And the beauty of crypto is, you can get involved, and you can put some money into, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 cryptos that have the chance to explode, and you can do it, inexpensively with still the chance of making a lot of money. And what I mean by that is, when you talk about your Bitcoins, your Ethereum, look, those are big cryptos. I believe they're stable and safe and a solid investment, but, the opportunity to take a little bit of money and make a lot of money, to me, isn't there with, Bitcoin. I mean, I don't know where Bitcoin's at right now, $35,000 or whatever it is. If you go put $1,000 in it and it goes from 35,000, to 70,000, which is a huge jump. Oh, you doubled your money. So in crypto, there's definitely some opportunities if we can all figure out the right ones, with these cryptos that are trading at, 50 cents, under 10 cents, under 5 cents, under a penny. And the beauty of jumping on something that's trading at a penny or whatever it may be, you put $200 in it, and just sit on it. And worst case scenario, you lose $200. Best case scenario, you make a bunch of money. So I think that there's a reward risk factor with crypto, with where we are now, with the opportunity to buy a lot of, really, inexpensive cryptos that have the potential to do something really big in the next year or two. So I think sitting on the sidelines is a mistake, especially when you can go invest, a couple $100, or maybe you go invest, $1,000. You put a couple $100 in, 4 or 5 cryptos that you really like, and then you just forget about it. And, again, worst case scenario is you lose that money. But, best case scenario is one of those cryptos pops off and, your life's changed forever. So, to answer the question, yes, I invest in crypto. It's not something I put all my eggs in one basket. It's something that I started out with that same philosophy of, like, I'm going to throw $200 in this one. I'm going to throw $200 in this one. I'm going to throw $200 in this one. And I'm going to throw $300 in this one. And I'm just going to let it sit. Now, over the course of the last 5 years, for me doing that, I've got a pretty, I'd say a substantial portfolio based on the fact that I've just been putting in a couple $100 here and there. But, over the course of this last 5 years, I own probably 25 different cryptos that, and I have a lot of faith in a lot of them. So, one of the other things that I'm hearing consistently from guys I follow, guys I know and trust, is that over the next year or two, the entire crypto market is going to surge. So, in other words, there's some guys out there saying you can put a bunch of cryptos on the wall and throw a dart at them and not lose. Well, I don't know about that, but the point he's trying to make is, as a whole, the entire crypto market's going to make a surge forward. And then obviously there's going to be some in there that just pop off that, change people's lives. There's no doubt in my mind over the course of 2024 and 25 that there's going to be, a lot of lives changed. There's going to be a lot of money made in crypto, and there's going to be, a lot of missed opportunities. So to answer that first question, yes, it's something I've been dabbling in for for about 5 years now. And my confidence is high that, if you're smart, if you gamble with what you can afford to lose, and you buy the right one or a few of these smaller ones and just sit on, buy them, sit on them and forget about them. I think that, I would at least highly recommend, gambling a couple $100 here or there on some of these cryptos that are poised to take off here over the next year or two. All right. Like I said, I think I mentioned on the first podcast, we're always trying to group questions together, and we actually got 3 crypto questions. So let me get to the next one here. I heard you talking about crypto a while back on social media, and it sounded like you invest in crypto. So I wanted to see if you have any recommendations to someone brand new to it. Okay, well, that kind of ties in, obviously to that first question. My advice, if you want to get into it, above and beyond researching as much as you can, and trying to learn and understand and, make your decisions based on more than just someone's opinion, but, based on, research and forming your own opinions on what may or may not happen. If I were going to just give straight advice to someone who's brand new and said, hey, I don't, know anything. I don't really have a lot of time. I don't want to have to go learn and figure all this out. Not that I do, but obviously 5 years in, I know a little bit more than the guy that knows nothing. So, my advice would be, if you're at a point where you want to experiment with it, you don't want to say put a lot of time into it, but you're just like, man, I'm scared to miss it. I think there probably is an opportunity. And, the first time I ignored it and, people made, millions of dollars. I would say, go sign up, go get an account set up with someone like Coinbase. Again, I don't work with any of these companies, but, as crypto is becoming more mainstream and is getting more regulated by the government, there's no doubt you can kind of start to see how, a lot of these exchanges are probably going to go away. So, when I say an exchange, and again, I'm not some super finance wizard, but, if like a Coinbase is going to be similar to going and, downloading E-Trade or something for, just, buying and selling stocks, except it's for cryptos. There's a lot of them out there. I'm sure a lot of good ones. One of the things that I did that's helped me kind of also learn to peel back maybe on these exchanges is, a few years ago, it's a little weird. When you want to buy a stock, you go on, E-Trade or some sort of a mainstream stock exchange. And if it's a main stock, you can buy it through pretty much whatever platform. With crypto, it's a little weird. If you have Coinbase, you can buy certain cryptos, but you can't buy others. If you're on Binance, you can buy cryptos that you can't buy on Coinbase. If you're on eToro, you can buy some cryptos there that you can't buy on Binance. And the list goes on and on. So, I definitely went down that rabbit hole, or whatever you want to call it, of, firing up, 5 or 6 different exchanges so I could get all the different cryptos that I wanted. And then again, I started to learn more about things like a wallet and a cold storage wallet. And I'll talk about that in a second. So Coinbase, I only mention Coinbase because, if I'm not mistaken, again, I'm not an expert. From what I understand, when it comes to how they're being regulated, Coinbase is the first, or one of the first platforms that's like, qualified, as far as the regulations. They're doing things the right way. They're not going away. I believe, that over the course of the next year or so, we're going to see certain exchanges go away. And, there's definitely risk to crypto. There's definitely risk to crypto in different ways than, say, owning a stock on, again, E-Trade. You own a stock on E-Trade, stock's going up or down. That's it. with these exchanges and, just you look at where cryptos come from, you look where it is, there's definitely some risk. If you're, again, I'm not an expert, but if you've got crypto tied up in a certain exchange and all of a sudden that exchange, goes belly up, you could be in trouble on getting your money. So I'm trying to keep my exchanges as few as possible and also, using a wallet. Again, I'll talk about that in a minute. So, Coinbase, is one that's probably going to be around. They seem to be meeting all the regulatory requirements and so forth and so on. And I would go on there, I'd set up an account, you download it out of the App Store. You're going to set it up similar to like a bank account or a trading account. Not real hard to do. Once you have that set up, I would research and try to figure out, hey, which cryptos do I want to, dabble with? Which ones do I want to throw a few bucks at? For me, I know one part of the question was, do I recommend any? I could just tell you based on all my years of research, I definitely have a handful of cryptos in my portfolio that I have a lot of confidence in that are very cheap. And if one of these, does remotely what people think they're going to do over the next year or two, it's going to change lives. I'm going to cheat here. And so my top pick would be XRP. I can talk about that for hours on why I think that's the case. I'm not alone in that. There's a huge XRP army out there that believes in XRP. It's trading at around 60 cents. So again, this is when you go put a couple $100 in. If you can put $500 in it, great. Put in an amount that you can afford to lose. But I would say, XRP is my probably top pick. XLM is another pick. Sol, SOL is another pick. ADA, which is Cardano, is another pick. I would say that that little handful right there would probably be, my top picks. If I was just talking to a good buddy and he said, man, I just, give me 4 or 5, cryptos that I can just go put, $200 a piece in, that would probably be my list. If you want to throw a couple, $200-$300 in one crypto and forget about it, I'd throw it into XRP. Again, that's just my opinion. I could be totally wrong. But again, this is just based on my thoughts and my opinion after 5 years of, really diving into this stuff and also talking to, like I said, a lot of guys that are a lot smarter than me. All right, last question. Tyler Bonts from Wisconsin. What cryptos would you recommend to buy? Okay, so kind of already went into all that based on the previous question. So those, cryptos I named off earlier, like, XRP would be my top pick, XLM, ADA, those would be, those would be my top picks right now. And again, it's one of those things like if my best friend came up to me and said, I want to put $200 into 5 different cryptos, those would be the ones I would tell him. Am I right? Who knows? Am I wrong? Who knows? I can tell you a lot of research for me has gone into those. There's, like I said, I probably own 25 different ones, but those would be my top picks. And if it's something you want to dive into and try, and without a lot of risk, but with the chance, you go through $200-$300 in XRP and just forget about it. If XRP does remotely what they think it's going to do over the next year or two, that $200 or $300 will change your life. So I would say if you're interested in it, research, download one of the, crypto platforms like Coinbase where you can actually, buy and sell crypto. And I would recommend putting a little bit of money into the ones you believe in and just forget about them. Don't stare at them. Don't look at them every day. Don't get too excited if it goes up a little bit. Don't freak out if it goes down. If you do pay attention to it and it goes up enough to get your first money back, do that. If you put $300 in XRP and over the next couple of weeks it goes up to $600 and you want to pull your 300 out, and now you've got your 300 in there and hey, it's free money. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I made a decision to invest in certain cryptos and then just to forget about them. And, I've watched some of them go up and down where, I kind of was like, ugh, maybe I should have took a few grand out of that. But, I'm kind of staying committed to my plan. The other thing I will mention is a wallet. I know I talked about that earlier. Since our last question I'd already kind of answered, I'll get into the wallet. So again, this is something new to me. So for years, I was buying crypto on crypto exchanges, and that money was sitting in that exchange. Well, for a lot of reasons, from what I understand, that can be dangerous. It's not the safest place. From what I've learned, based on my research and the people I talk to, it's not the safest place to let it sit. So they have, hot wallets and cold wallets. I went to a cold wallet this past year. And basically it's a physical device that's not connected to anything. And you move your crypto out of the exchange. So if you've got, $1,000 worth of cryptos in Coinbase, you can send them to your cold wallet. Your Coinbase account is now empty if you send it all there, so there's nothing at risk, and it stays in that physical wallet. Okay, so it's the absolute safest way to store your crypto. Now, while it's sitting in your wallet, it's still going up and down, right? So even though it's not in your exchange, it's basically, and again, I'm no expert, but it's basically a secret key to your crypto that's living on the blockchain. The blockchain is, just look at it as the backbone, the framework of, the crypto world. So it's there, if it's going up, your crypto's going up. If it's going down, it's going down. So being in your wallet doesn't freeze it or lock it up. It just protects it. From what I understand, and I don't know about all the different wallets, I think there are some wallets that you can do transactions out of. What I have is a cold storage wallet where I moved my crypto into that wallet, and then that wallet sits in my safe. And it's just off the radar. No one can get to it. If something takes a dump, if the exchange that I bought it through goes under, it gets hacked, doesn't matter. No one can get to my crypto that's on my cold storage wallet. And like I said, I keep mine in my, I got a big gun safe, obviously. So, I keep my crypto cold wallet. I keep it stashed in my safe. So that would be the other recommendation, is if you get into crypto, I don't care if you got $1,000 in it or $10,000 in it. I think having a wallet is very smart, and it's definitely the best way to protect your crypto. Well, I think that'll about do it. Definitely a subject I didn't expect. I expected a lot of hunting, a lot of spearfishing and outdoorsy stuff, maybe some family stuff, but kind of cool to get, some, questions about crypto out of the gate here for our second podcast. So interesting to see, what future questions come in. Again, we want to keep this wide open. We want to keep the topics really no topic off subject. And it's really just a chance for me to, interact with my fans and answer some questions and hopefully you guys learn some things, and hopefully I learn some things from you guys. So until next time, this has been Straight Talk with Jon Brunson.